So Mark, I can't understate how much of a pleasure it is to be here at the historic Heath House to talk to you about some of your favourite moments and reflect on some of the history here, because there is plenty of it.
Well, it's a historic place and I'm very lucky to be here. All of us are slaves to our property to a greater or lesser degree, and I've certainly slaved to try and make this place as nice a place as I can and as modern as I can, whilst embracing the old times, but to make it as modern as I can.
I love the way that you've tried to protect history as much as you can as well. For example, St Simon's skin on the wall. It's great, isn't it, really?
Well, I suppose I love history and I love the place. We're all a slave to our property to a lesser or greater degree. And so I wanted to try and make it so that if Matt Dawson and Fred Archer came back, they could find their way round, but all the most modern things were here. And there was a treadmill and a swimming pool and covered horse walkers, and to try and make it the most up-to-date 50-horse stable in the world, but that they wouldn't get lost walking around.
What do you think Dawson and Archer would have made the innovation like that new swimming pool and the treadmill?
I think they would have. You don't get to the top without being very progressive, and I think they would have enjoyed it and found it of interest. And Mr. Waugh, my governor, who had none of those aids, I think they'd have found it of interest.
Because you said to me when you put in that swimming pool early on in your career, it was a bit of an innovation itself.
It was the second pool built, I think, or the third, and Mr. Mander, who's still going, I'm proud to say, and I it was a bit Heath Robinson, and thanks to Alpinista, we've redone it this year, and so that it's not entirely dependent upon some lunatic logic. It now works so that people can understand it. So it was one of the big helps when she won the Arc.
One of the fastest horses in your yard, no doubt about it, was Marcia. She won the Nunthorpe, of course, and I know that she was, at one time, almost faster than the treadmill.
She was. We got the treadmill about 6 or 7 years ago, and basically most horses will relax on it, and you use it, lots of trainers use it for different things, rehabilitation, not so many actually for training, but Marcia, being a sprinter, officially the machine can go faster than any racehorse, but she got increasingly competitive on it and she'd be waiting for it to quicken up. So whereas she was a very good ride on the heath, she became too much on the treadmill, and she could go faster than the treadmill designer intended it to go. So in the end we had to stop using it, but I don't expect I'm going to find another one to go faster than the treadmill.
Yeah, I can imagine. Just going back to Spindrift, who of course won all those races for you, did that ignite the fire in your belly a little bit to start training horses with sequences in mind, because that became something of a métier for you down the years?
Yes, it did, and I mean with him it was that I suppose we were the first people to work out that there was a succession of races which were condition races, and as long as your horse hadn't won 2,500, you got no penalties. So by working backwards through the programme book, you managed to get this sequence, and he more or less won them all. And the great triumph I always felt was he only got 7 stone 13 in the free handicap, and yet he won more races than any 2-year-old for a century. So
and you wouldn't get that now, really, would you?
No, you couldn't do it. I thought it was the most wonderful training performance, and I was congratulating myself enormously. And Bill O'Gorman did it twice in no time at all with Providio and Timeless Times, and then the authorities did change the races.
But I suppose you have to congratulate yourself, don't you, for a trainer, because otherwise you're not going to be getting any more wins in the future. You think,
Yes,
oh, I can't do this.
I always find as soon as you start congratulating yourself, somebody tells you that did it straight. I remember having first and second in the Cambridgeshire, and as I walked off the stand, Steve Norton said, "Well done, Sir Mark, marvellous. I remember doing it 4 years ago. I thought this was the most wonderful achievement." So it's good for you.
And I suppose the step up from conditions races and handicap victories to the likes of Pivotal was a slow one, or did it happen?
Yes, very slow.
Yeah.
Jack Berry and I were battling away, having never won a Group 1, and Jack never did win that Group 1, which is awful, really. Such a marvellous man, and did so much for everybody.
Yeah.
But yes, it took a long time to come, the first Group 1.
Inside the final furlong now, and it's evening performance in the lead. Here comes Hever Golf Road. Pivotal's putting in a big finish. Evening performance and Pivotal as they drive to the line. It's going to be close. A photo!
It was a great day. It was a great day for Cheveley Park. It was the foundation, really, of Pivotal became the foundation stone for Cheveley Park. He was the first horse that they had bred themselves who went back to stud. He was a landmark for us all, I think, and a wonderful horse. He was less straightforward to train, and he'd have been easier to train in modern times with a swimming pool and a treadmill and those things to help him along. He became an even better sire than he was a racehorse.
Yeah, not half. That must have been made you quite proud, I imagine.
Well, reflected glory is always very good.
Yeah,
always
absolutely.
very good. Yeah.
And once you get that first Group 1 win on the board, I assume it gives you that confidence to try and get some more.
Well, I don't know that you needed the confidence. We gave you the material to win, and Last Second had come along the same year.
Of course, yeah.
So we suddenly went from just winning quite a lot of minor races to having the champion sprinter and the champion mile and the quarter mare. And that transformed everything, really. But when you've got relatively small yard, I mean, we have 50 boxes, obviously the numbers restrict how often those good ones come through, and you've got to try and not make a mistake with them, if at all possible.
And were you always keen to try and keep it to 50, not to go elsewhere and try and rent another place out?
I never took more than 65 horses on the books, which meant that really you're pretty full all the time. And there were a few big decisions to make. I didn't regret them. Well, the awful thing is that if somebody asks you to have a horse and you genuinely cannot fit it in, you write them the most lovely letter and say, I'd love to have one for you next year. They never ask again. It's the most interesting thing. And but you know, at one time we did literally turn away 60 yearlings. So it was a big decision. Yeah. And I think, you know, young trainers now are very successful. When you get to a moment, you've either got to go or you're going to say, this is my number. And either is a good decision, but you mustn't regret it afterwards.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned young trainers. What do you make of the younger brigade coming through the likes
well,
of
they're
George
very good,
Harry
unfortunately.
Eustace?
They're very good.
More of a science, isn't it, these days? Almost?
Yes, and they're very good. And they've, you know, now there's very good trainers' courses before you start, and the handicapper comes, I think it's wicked, comes along and tells them what to do, and accountancy and all those things. And I hope the BHA will very much introduce a section for trainers and jockeys whereby they have to understand the arguments for our sport, because I think it's a wonderful opportunity to make sure that our own people know how to defend what is a great sport, but it's under pressure from people who have very little understanding.
Yeah, there is a lot more red tape, as you say.
Exactly, but if there's going to be red tape, let's have some useful red tape.
Well, quite right, and not the kind of health and safety red tape you're telling me about.
Well, yes, I mean, that's good. It was good, but it was difficult for us all at the time, and this poor man came down to talk to 81 trainers on health and safety. You can imagine what a dreadful task it was. And we were all nightmares to teach, but, you know, good came out of it. And in my own case, of course, we all had to get a health and safety statement. So I did my own, and it just says all horses are hell-bent on committing suicide from the day they're born till the day they finally manage it. Most of my staff are aiding and abetting them. My job as the trainer is to try and prevent them achieving their lifetime's ambition of killing one another simultaneously. So I put this up, and the health and safety man came round about 2 or 3 years later, and everybody said, oh, he'll make you. But he enjoyed it. I think
well, not a true word has been spoken.
But it captures it. I think all trainers will agree that every day we're trying not to have accidents, which are so easy when you've got volatile horses and going very fast. You know, it's an inevitable part. You know.
Let's talk about your team here, which is lovely.
Yeah.
And over the years, you've had plenty of fine riders and fine assistant trainers, the likes. I wanted to ask you about William Haggis, because, of course, he has become one of the foremost trainers. But
Willie,
he was your assistant
yes,
for a while.
He was. He's my pupil assistant. And famously, he said that I was the most hateful human being he'd ever met in the world, which is
I find very hard to believe
it's a
after
high
this morning.
bar. It's a high bar, and I feel I can never exceed that. And but he survived, and it's great to see him training these wonderful horses and the orange jackets all over the heath. So, and of course we've got 3 or 4 at the top in France. And when the filly won in France, it was wonderful they were very generous, and it was a great day, you know. And so I enjoy the successes of my former pupils, they love beating me, but they forget, of course, I'd rather be beaten by them than anyone else.
Well, of course, yeah. I mean, William seems to be these days a very serene and tranquil figure on the gallops. So was he always like that, or was he more of a young thruster?
Well, William, when he first came, I mean, he's very social and very, you know, so he had a fantastic time socially, which of course meant him being late a couple of times, which is viewed here with absolute horror. So it meant an inevitable clash, but we both survived. And what's interesting now is, of course, he's a massively good timekeeper himself, and absolutely enraged if people are either early or late. So he picked up some bad habits from me anyway.
But that's all part of your meticulous nature, isn't it, almost? Because everything is done to the minute here.
Well, I try to, because there isn't time to mess around. All trains are very busy, and the more we can sort of get it planned, and the better it goes, and the less irritation and the less disaster and forgetting to declare things. And, you know, it's all about memory and detail, and like most businesses. And you've either got to be good at it yourself, the detail, or you've got to employ people who can do it for you. And I think the big stables who have grown enormously is because their infrastructure is so good. They've been able to They do it very, very well, unfortunately. I'm always hoping that the young trainers won't be any good and the big trainers will get too big, but they seem to be doing very well.
It does seem that way.
Yes, it's a very worrying phase in my life. Yeah.
Part of your team has been the jockeys, of course, and you've always been very loyal towards your jockeys.
I've had good jockeys.
You've had good jockeys, but at the same time, you know, you've not really moved around. George Duffield, then Seb Sanders, then Luke Morris.
I had George for 31 years, Seb for 11, and Luke for 11, I think, or something like that. You know, I've been very lucky. None of them have been great stylists, but they've had that in common, and all three have been very nice men, and all three are tough and professional. They're not late, and they don't talk a lot of rubbish, and they don't waste time, and that suits me. Other people look for other qualities, you know, but I love professionalism. You know, I admire professionalism. Yeah.
And there must have been some thrill. We'll talk about Alpenista a little bit in a moment, but to see Luke Morris get that win, the Arc de Triomphe last year.
It was a great day, and for everybody, Miss Rousing, who's been such a supporter of the game and innovative too, you know, and Luke, who's battled his way around Wolverhampton and everywhere. And when he finally got a really good one, he won 8 consecutive group races on 6 Group 1s without the semblance of a mistake. Not the semblance of a mistake.
He was cool personified, wasn't he?
Isn't that interesting, you know, that, you know, we've taught these great things, and but a proper workman never made a hint of a mistake. And I think the nicest remark, we were laughing, was he said that before the Arc he'd watched, in the 2 previous days, he'd watched 28 Arc de Triomphe. And he watched the whole thing through, and when he turned out of the full straight, he said it occurred to him with 2.5 furlongs to run that none of them winners had been going as well as he was going at that moment. So must have been a wonderful feeling.
And he also must have thought to himself, I can't possibly mess
please
this one
God,
up, surely.
I don't get this bit. So I think, you know, for all of us it was a wonderful day. I don't suppose I'll have a better. Yeah.
Would you say that was your highlight of your racing career?
Yes, I think my first winner as a very bad jockey was fantastic, and I think that was fantastic. And in between there've been goods and bads, but they were the best. Yeah.
And for Kirsten Rousing as well, who's been a big supporter of yours
fantastic,
for years.
you know, and I'm lucky enough. I mean, we might have time before you go, but there's the sculpture of Alpenista that's just arrived, and there's Alvarada, who was her aunt, and there's Albanova, who was her grandmother. And I've been lucky enough to train all 3. I think I'm right in saying they won 14 Group 1s for me.
Such a talented family.
What a marvellous thing to have them all done by Philip Blacker, 21 years between them, so it's unusual to have the same sculptor to do them all. No, I've been very lucky. Yeah.
And one of my favourite things about Alpenista was the way that she was brought along by yourself pretty gradually, and just had that improvement that was
she got better
slow,
and better.
But yeah, really
she got better and better. And of course, from my point of view, the wonderful thing was that as she always exceeded what everybody was hoping, there was none of those awful disappointments and those head-scratching journeys home, and she just gradually got better. So you weren't exposed to any of the pressures at all, really. She saved me.
Yeah.
You know, it was responsibility rather than pressure training her. Yeah, that's a difference.
And I think as talented as she was, it takes a certain kind of disposition to be able to tough it out in a race like the Arc, but also in that ground, which was pretty horrendous.
We hadn't thought would suit her.
Is that right? Yeah.
No, because up till then her best form had been on top of the ground. But I suppose, like good horses, she was versatile. And she got better, and she was simple. You know, wouldn't it be lovely to say that it was some marvellous? But she was straightforward. She ate up, and she was pleased to do her work, and she looked well.
Yeah.
Put weight on. All those things, you know, all us trainers were battling with all these things, and just every now and again you get one and it does it itself.
Absolutely, yeah. She was so talented.
Big thing is not to make the mistake. My old governor, Jack Wall, who was so marvellous to me and trained here for 30 or 40 years, Mr. Wall once said a chilling thing to me, which is he said that everybody knows that good horses make good trainers and good jockeys. What they often forget is that they ruthlessly expose bad ones. It's a terrifying thought, isn't it? So when you get a good one, like these words of Mr. Wars descend on me, that now you've got to make sure you get this right.
And I know you said that Luke Morris, that is, was very confident that he had a lot of horse under him coming inside the full straight. When Alpinista hit the front, what were your emotions? Do you think she might hang on, or was it?
Yes, I thought she would.
Yeah.
I always felt that, I think I said somewhere in the press beforehand that I always felt she'd be in front 150 yards out. And after that, it depended whether she hung on or whether one of those horrible French and Germans who are so good at coming from behind get you, you know.
Yeah.
So when she hit the front going well, yes, I think she was going better than I expected, but I equally expected her to hit the front there. Would she hang on? I was standing next to Mike Dillon, and he said apparently I never moved, and all he could hear me whisper was, wait. I have no idea whether that's right or not, but he did wait.
He certainly did, yeah. It was a fantastic piece of riding.
And so it was just a most wonderful day, and it was a shame she couldn't go to the Japan Cup, but it was marvellous to end on a good note. And I'd have loved her to have gone to Japan because, of course, there was this enormous £6 million if she won. I could feel it going into my top pocket.
Could have bought a few more swimming pools.
Yes, exactly. And I had all sorts of plans, but Miss Rousing, I think, was relieved when she didn't go, because I think it was so wonderful to end unbeaten and for 2 years.
Yeah.
I think I've never told someone that their horse was favourite for a big race and wasn't going to run who took the news better than Miss Rousing. I think there was a degree of relief.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're in the main yard here. Am I right in thinking that Alpinista spent some time in the smaller one across
Well, they
the road?
all start in the little yard,
in the little yard, yeah.
Osborne Yard, because that's where the 2-year-olds start, and then they progress round. And she wound up in the top of the end box, which is where the senior citizen, or it's occupied, I'm afraid to say, by a less worthy occupant this year. But so she worked her way around, as they all do. Yeah.
And I've got to mention Mrs. Challoner as well.
Yes.
Who lived in the house next to your smaller yard. And a amazing woman who lived an incredible life and outlived her 11 kids, which was astonishing.
I can't remember whether it was 94 or 96 she lived to be. And she and her husband bought what was a derelict site, really. The boxes on the left were Frampton's, which had been there since 1604. And then she added on Osborne House and the rest of Osborne Yard. She trained only about 8 or 10 years after her husband died, and then the son took over. But that was when licensing started, so she managed to keep being licensed as a woman. But they never licensed another one until 1967.
Wow.
And she had 11 children, all of which, one lived to be 71, and she outlived them all. Marvellous.
It's astonishing.
Half magnificent and half sad.
Yeah.
And they've named this race after her, which was marvellous. She strangely, because she left 3,800, which was quite a sum of money in those days, she had no marked grave, so presumably her children were all dead. The grandchildren took no interest, And so it's only
pretty tragic, that really, isn't it?
It's only recently, with the sort of rise of the Me Too movement, that Mrs. Challoner has emerged from an unmarked grave to have a race named after her, which is a wonderful thing. And her great-grandson is Charlie Swan, who was 9 times champion jockey in Ireland. So the genes live on. She'd have been pleased. My old governor Jack Waugh knew her, so I knew all about her. She was very much a sort of Heath House heroine, but it's nice that she's got recognition now.
And all those years ago, it was Heath House, really. It was one of the first yard here, and Newmarket kind of grew around it.
Well, yes, it did, because Frampton was the first trainer, so he put it in the right spot. Thankfully for me, I never stopped thanking him, right at the foot of Warren Hill. And then the rest grew up round, and of course the 3 major American trainers came here. So as well as Matt Dawson, who nurtured Fred Archer, the champion jockey, Mr. Huggins came, who brought with him Todd Sloane, who was the first jockey to ride short, who transformed how jockeys rode. Within 2 years, everyone had to ride short. And from whom came the expression, on your Todd, Todd Sloane, rhyming slang, making the running.
I couldn't believe that when you told me that this morning.
Yeah, so Todd lives on.
Yeah, it certainly does. In every kind of way of parlance as well, not just racing.
And of course, the British, immediately he was doing so well, we're so sporting, after 3 years took his licence off him and sent him back to America. Mr. Huggins lasted 4 years, and I mean, the British are scandalously bad losers, contrary to popular opinion.
Just penalising success for no reason.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely outrageous.
Yeah. So they've sent them back as quick as they could. Yeah.
So you've done pretty well to last as long as you
Well, I haven't done as well as them.
Watch live racing now on racingtv.com.